program coming up on September 25th with Dr. James Waller called When is it Genocide? A Conversation about the Crime of Crimes. This discussion will tackle some of the hard questions so many of us are asking behind closed doors. I want to thank the Alabama Holocaust Education Center, who is stepping up to partner on this program. We are also offering a series of workshops for teachers on anti-Semitism, genocide, media literacy, and teaching the Holocaust through graphic novels, and more. And of course, there is today's timely program, offered in partnership with a group of Holocaust centers from around the country, as part of the larger series, What History Teaches, which looks at themes and actions throughout history that resonate with us today. Today's topic, the politics of scapegoating, couldn't be more relevant, and we are fortunate to have one of the leading local experts on the topic with us to discuss how this has presented itself historically and what it looks like today. Dr. Beth Griech-Polelle is the Kurt Mayer Chair of Holocaust Studies at Pacific Lutheran University in Tacoma, Washington. Her most recent publications include Antisemitism and the Holocaust, Language, Rhetoric, and the Traditions of Hatred, and the Nuremberg War Crimes Trial and its Policy Consequences Today. She has also written numerous chapters in books and journals, and her areas of expertise include Holocaust and genocide studies, modern German history, the Catholic Church leadership in Nazi Germany, and European women's history. Dr. Beth Griech-Polelle is a frequent presenter at our teacher training programs and at scholarly seminars throughout the region. We will take questions at the end of the program. Please type in your questions at any time into the Q&A. Beth, thank you so much for being a part of this program today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Alana, and my thanks go out to everyone who's been able to join us today or who's going to plan to watch this as a recording later in time. My thanks go to the Holocaust Center for Humanity in Seattle, a wonderful partnership that we have at Pacific Lutheran University and our Holocaust and Genocide Studies program. We benefit greatly from that partnership, and I'm also so grateful to see Holocaust centers coming together to work together as one. And so today we're going to leap right in because we only have a limited amount of time during a lunch and learn. And so the topic for today of what history teaches as part of this series, we're going to focus in on what's called scapegoating and the politics of othering. And I'm going to ask a wonderful behind-the-scenes tech person to advance the slides. So pardon me if you hear me say next slide, okay? Okay, next slide. Yep, that's fine, Haley. Thank you. All right, so I thought we should start off with a little bit of background, right, and make sure that everybody understands kind of what we're talking about. And obviously, scapegoating is this notion that's been around since probably the dawn of time. And it's the idea, particularly for our focus, of targeting Jewish people and blaming them for every possible evil that exists in the world, blaming them for any time a misfortune befalls either a person or a society. And we're going to see how scapegoating, blaming Jews for every bad thing that your society is dealing with, coupled with this idea of othering, of pushing Jews to the kind of margins of the community as outcasts, as outsiders. On your screen, if you're looking at the PowerPoint slide, you'll see that they were labeled enemy outsiders. Another phrase that comes up over and over again in Nazi Germany is to label Jews as internal enemies, right? That they are living within German society. They seem to be a part of German society. They speak German. They're fairly well assimilated, but they are working from within to destroy the German nation. Part of what I'm going to be focusing in for today is how Hitler successfully puts forward through his rhetoric, through his language, and through Nazi propaganda, the very, very black and white image of us versus them. We, the Aryan, non-Jewish population of Germany, are against them, the Jews. And of course, there are other people placed into this them category, but our focus will be on the attacks against Jewish people and the attempt to blame them for everything. For the Nazis, and I tell this to all my students in every class, the Nazis don't really create very much that's actually new. And in reality, they draw on, sorry, outside the window, there's a very loud vehicle, so we'll let them go by. Sorry about that if you picked up that noise. Nazi propaganda very clearly draws on well-established pre-existing anti-Semitic myths and stereotypes, all types of false legends, in their attempt to convince the Aryan German population that really the only reason why Germany is in the state that it is in currently is because Jews live amongst us. And they draw upon all of this lengthy history that's been around for, unfortunately, thousands of years to portray Jews as in league with the devil, that they are sly, that they are sneaky, and that this image of the cunning Jew is used as a way to instill fear and anxiety in the average German Aryan population. The other part of this message and propaganda that the Nazis will put out is the promise. And the promise is we could have a peaceful, harmonious society, a utopia, if the Volksgemeinschaft, and that's a big German word, it just means people's community, but Hitler uses that quite frequently. So Hitler will say the Volksgemeinschaft could be this ideal Aryan world. But the only way to achieve that is by pushing out and pushing the other to the absolute limits of society. And then ultimately, that rhetoric escalates to the point where they're saying you have to destroy the other entirely. And next slide, please. Oh, next slide. Haley, can you do? Oh, thank you, hon. Thank you. Sorry, we'll get it. We're doing okay. All right. So I wanted you to at least see a few examples of Nazi propaganda appealing to the Aryan non-Jewish population. And so on the left of the screen, you can see that the idealized image of the German student, right? He's blonde, he's got angular features, he's, tanned from being out healthy outside. And then there's also the image of the woman, and the Aryan woman is the ideal, is someone who is not political, not out in the world, but becomes a mother. And here you see an image of the young woman, and she's already got two children, right? One in her arms and one holding on to her hips. Next slide, please. In this particular image, what we can see is kind of this us versus them come to life, right? And here you see this idealized image of the Aryan man, and he is grabbing the Jewish man. That's this caricature that the Nazis use time and time again of what a Jewish man is supposed to look like. And he's grabbing him by the shirt collar, again, threatening him. And these types of images are going to come over and over and over again. We can do the next slide as well. All right, so for the Nazis, what does the Volksgemeinschaft need? What does this people's community need? And this becomes a feature not just of the Holocaust, but you could look at other genocides and see these key components. Hitler is going to talk about the need for Nazis, for the German Aryan population to maintain blood purity, right? That they must maintain their ethnic identity and their ancestral heritage, and they can't so-called interbreed with lesser people. Another element that the Nazis are going to put forward is we can give you permanent security. You can live in a world where you feel comfortable and safe if we take care of the other, if we get rid of them as a threat. And then they can reaffirm their identity of who they are by actually destroying the Jew, right? And this is kind of this archetypal kind of standing outside of history image of the Jew, this kind of eternal, immutable character. For the most simplistic way to boil down what Nazi propaganda is really putting forward is basically what I think of as two sides of the same coin. On one side, they're saying the Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community, can be successful, can be safe, can be this ideal world. But the other side of the coin is that Jews have to die. They must be destroyed in order for this to actually be realized. And throughout this imagery of scapegoating Jews, of blaming them, we can see over and over again that there's an association of Jews with the devil, associated with all things evil. And part of the propaganda that is put forward is to tell Aryan people that you are not a bad person if you discriminate and persecute against Jewish people. Because in the Nazi mindset, they say Jews would do much worse to you if given the opportunity. And so in reality, you are a good person when you do a bad thing to a Jewish person because you are doing a preemptive strike. Before the Jew can harm you and your people, you are eliminating that threat. And of course, what that ends up doing is it portrays Aryans as the victims, right? That they are the real victims of cunning Jews outwitting the naive Aryan people. Okay, so we can do the next slide. In this slide, I picked this one because I wanted you to show this combination of us versus them, evil versus good. And it's kind of encapsulated in what you can make out from, this is taken from a Nazi newspaper called Der Stürmer. And if you look at the image, the way it's portrayed, there's an idealized Aryan man. He's been lashed to a cross. He's being crucified. And if you can read really carefully around his waistband, it says Deutschland. It is Germany being crucified. And here we again meet the caricature, the stereotypical depiction of a Jewish man. And so they're hearkening back in this one image to the image of the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth and the longest anti-Semitic stereotype that Jews are all throughout all of history to be deemed Christ killers. And here now we have the sacrificial lamb. It's not Jesus. Now it is the country of Germany. And so this becomes part and parcel of everyday propaganda. These types of images are everywhere, not just in Nazi newspapers, but in magazines, in posters, in films, basically any kind of media of the day. These are ubiquitous. All right, so how about if we do the next slide? All right, so when we talk about the image of the Jew, what we're really looking at is what a scholar named Thomas Kuhne, who's written a fantastic book called Belonging and Genocide. He's talking about what binds a group of people together. And part of what his argument is that when people are involved in and complicit in committing a crime, it binds them together. Basically, now we're all in it. We're all guilty. And so none of us want to go down in flames, right? And so we all have to stick together. And so persecuting Jews, discriminating against Jews, and I would argue even being that so-called bystander, probably the more useful terminology is this implicated subject, that you have witnessed something terrible happening to a Jewish person or to the Jewish community, and you're left with trying to make a choice. Should I intervene? Should I say something? And you choose not to. That means you become complicit in the guilt. And everything that Hitler deems as threatening, as evil in the world, is now placed on the shoulders of the Jewish people. So whether it's, hey, you didn't like losing the end of the First World War, that was humiliating for you. That's because Jews wanted Germany to lose. You didn't you suffered through the mid 1920s hyperinflation that wiped out your life savings and of course impoverished you. Well, Hitler says that's because the Jews control all the money and all the finances. And so you can see how this kind of scapegoating is so appealing to so many people. And constantly, you are, as an Aryan person, being bombarded with the images that who are the Jews? They're everything bad. They are chaotic. They're disruptive. They are everything that is ripping our community of Aryan Germans apart. And as I put on the slide here, Jews come to be, or the image of the Jew comes to really stand outside of history. And what I mean by that is that it's this concept that the Jew has never changed, that it's filled with immutable qualities and characteristics and traits that will never change, which means they're going to be a constant dire threat to people throughout the world. And I think if we could do the next slide. All right, I picked this slide because this is again from Der Stürmer, and this was really the most anti-Semitic newspaper, and it's really the only newspaper that Hitler read every time it was published, from front cover to back cover. And this is one of those images of, again, not only associating Jews with world conquest, world domination, but we can see that in the very center is a scary spider, right? And if you can read it, you can make out on towards the one side of the spider, it says Jews, and we've got the Star of David. And of course, it shows that this evil Jewish spider has caught all of these innocent people in its web and is destroying them. What I would also kind of like to point out with this image is the further dehumanization of Jews that is taking place. Over the course of time, what we're going to see is that the Nazis are going to, again, not only use that caricature of a Jewish man that we've seen in some of the slides already, but now they're also going to begin targeting Jews, making them into pests and parasites, microbes, things that scare people, that are vermin, rats, so on and so forth. And this is to further dehumanize them in the eyes of the Aryan population, which at least theoretically could make people more likely to harm Jewish people. If you don't see them as people any longer, and time and again, Hitler makes speeches where he says, Jews are like a cancer. And what do you do when you have a cancer? You remove it, you cut it out, right? You destroy it. And so that kind of dehumanization is going to be coupled up with all of this pushing Jews. They're not like us. They're not like us Aryan people, and we must always be on our guard. Okay, I think we can do the next slide. All right, and so part of what we end up with here is that the message that gets put forward of bringing this dehumanization, the othering, the scapegoating for the Aryan population. Much of the Nazi propaganda is directed in a positive way to them, right? To say we can be energized as a community. We can all pull all of our Aryan qualities. And of course, this whole idea that Aryans have special superior qualities comes from social Darwinist ideology. We can always talk about that during Q&A if you're interested. But the idea is that Aryans should feel that they're part of this dynamic, vibrant movement designed to rebuild and restore pride in themselves and in their community. At the same time, the propaganda gives a kind of negative message that tells an Aryan person that if you haven't been successful, right, if you don't feel that you have been successful in your life, that's because there are people that are preventing you from being the success that you know you can be. And so again, it's the scapegoating, the saying you don't have to take personal responsibility for losing your job or for not making as much money as you think you deserve to be making. You can foist all of that onto particularly the Jews, but in many of the other propaganda messages, other groups of people are also blamed for so-called weighing down the Aryan population. And so on the slide, I put that Nazis will, of course, attack communists and socialists and pacifists. They will attack the mentally disabled, the physically disabled. And all of this is kind of couched in this idea that those are individuals, those are communities that are different from the Aryan superior race, and they want to drag the Aryan people down. Part of what makes Hitler so successful, particularly in the 1920s and early 30s when he's on the campaign trail, is that he's very shrewd. When he makes his presentations, he promises things in very broad, vague terms. So, for example, he frequently promises that if he becomes the leader of Germany, he will provide Aryans with a higher quality of life. Now, what's fascinating about that is that he doesn't specify how do you define what is a higher quality of life, right? Instead, he leaves that open to anyone in the audience. You can now kind of fill in the blank. It's kind of like if you remember the old Mad Libs, right, where there's a blank and you fill it in. You can now fill in when Hitler says higher quality of life, to me, that means I'm going to make more money. To someone else, it might mean maybe I feel more fulfilled as a person. To someone else, it might mean I have a car when I didn't have one before. And so this is a very shrewd tactic that allows Hitler to draw in a wider audience of supporters, right? To let them fill in the blank. And then, of course, if you don't make more money when Hitler's in power, you really can't accuse him because he didn't specifically promise that you as an Aryan would have more money in your pocket. What he also is doing, as he's promising this higher quality of life for average Aryan people, he is banking on the fact that as people's lives do get better for some of the population, that they will be willing to ignore what is being done to this minority population of the Jews. And unfortunately, it's a sad testimony to human nature that many people, once they begin deriving benefits, and if you're a healthy Aryan person, your life is getting better. And I'll just give you one real case example of one Aryan mother was talking to another Aryan friend of hers, and she said, "Oh, my daughter is being courted by two different young men." And she said, "I hope my daughter picks the young man who's a lawyer because right now they're firing all the Jews. And that means that he'll have a better chance of becoming a judge and he'll make more money." And so they're right out in kind of not even ignoring it. She knows that Jewish people are losing their jobs and that they can derive a benefit from that. And this ties back into what I mentioned earlier, that once a person derives a benefit from a Jewish person's misfortune, they are complicit in the guilt. They have bought into the ideology and the system of us versus them. And that means that for most of those people who've derived the benefits, they are less likely to engage in acts of opposition or resistance to the Nazi regime. Okay, so how about we go to the next slide? The big concept that scholars typically talk about when we talk about Hitler in power as the Chancellor of Germany and then ultimately the legal dictator of Germany is the concept of social death. And here, it's much like we've been already looking at scapegoating, pushing Jews to the margins, stereotyping them, dehumanizing them. Part of what Hitler is going to do is try to have this kind of basic goal. And the goal is to segregate the Jewish population from the Aryan population. That segregation and isolation and ostracization of Jews is for a specific reason. And Hitler believes that if an Aryan person doesn't know a Jewish person well or intimately, they will be indifferent to the fate of the Jews. And of course, from the first 5 years that Hitler's in power, from 1933 to 1938, we're going to see every attempt is made through particularly the enactment of legislation that puts restrictions upon where Jews can live, where Jews can work, where Jews can shop, uh, all kinds of public venues, movie theaters, spas, hairdressers, barber shops. All of these are going to become segregated institutions. And on the slide, just for your information, I tried to put down the very first kind of, I think as historians, sometimes we nerd out on what are the first things that we do. And actually, I'll just draw attention to the slide that one of the first things that Hitler does against Jews specifically is on the 1st of April, 1933. He's only been the leader of Germany since the end of January, but his government announces a nationwide 7-day boycott of Jewish owned and operated stores. And this is kind of Hitler testing the water. I mentioned earlier, Hitler's a shrewd politician. He's always very worried about his popularity among the Aryan population. He wants to see how far can he go in persecuting Jews? What will the Aryan population tolerate? What will they go along with? And so this 7-day boycott ends in a disaster. It's basically a pogrom. And if you know the word pogrom, it comes from Russian and it means destruction. And it's specifically because of all of the Russian czars attacking the Jewish community. And what Hitler finds is that that 7-day boycott has to be called off at the end of April 1st, the very first day. And so he sees that perhaps the Aryan population is not necessarily ready to physically assault Jews, to break shop windows, to loot their stores, to drag Jewish shop owners into the street and humiliate them. And so he pivots to providing legislation. And part of the understanding that Hitler has is he says, when he thinks about Aryan Germans, they have an inordinate respect for the law, right? And so when he begins to pass legislation that is designed to harm Jews, to segregate them, to further isolate them and ostracize them from the Aryan community, the idea is that this will give an average German person a kind of loophole, right, or an out, if you will. And what I mean by that is that once these laws begin, we're going to find people that say, oh, I'm not an anti Semite. I don't have anything against the Jews, but the law is the law. And I'll give you one example that always springs to my mind. And this is a little bit later than 1938, when restrictions are placed upon what grocery stores Jews can shop in. And then there's limitations on what types of food products Jews are allowed to purchase. And it's a story of a Jewish woman, a mother, with her young daughter. and they're in at the allotted time at the allotted store where they're allowed to shop. And they're the only two individuals in the store besides the owner of the store. And the little girl sees a display of fresh cherries. She wants those cherries, and she starts begging her mother, please, mommy, buy me these cherries. And the mom tries to explain to her daughter, we're Jews, we're not allowed to buy fresh fruit. I can't buy you these cherries. And of course, the little girl dissolves into tears. She's crying, I want the cherries. And of course, there's that one Aryan grocery store owner, and he can see this child crying because she wants cherries. Now, we would like to believe that the ending of the story is that the store owner looks around and sees there's no one else in his store, and that he could have simply walked over, grabbed a fistful of cherries, put them in the little girl's pocket, and said nothing, just said, go out of the store. But he doesn't. He refuses to give her any cherries, even though no one else is there. And he can feel good about himself for denying a crying child some fresh fruit, because he can say, I don't have anything against the Jews, but the law is the law. And the law says Jews can't have cherries. And so I'm not a bad person. And so the more that people can tell themselves that I'm not a bad person for harming Jews, the more complicit, the more they get kind of sucked into this system that says we, the Aryans, stand against them, the Jews. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, please. I put this one in again to kind of drive home the point of the dehumanization of Jews. There's this kind of steady escalation. And here you can see that this parasite is trying to devour the world. Of course, that they have added in what they consider to be a Jewish nose, so a very elongated nose. If you're in doubt that it's supposed to represent the Jews, if the image was a little bit clearer, you could see the pupils and the eyes. One is the Star of David, and the other is the hammer and sickle representing communism or Bolshevism in the Soviet Union. And this is, again, this steady drumbeat of the image that Jews are like the devil. They are out to control the world. They are out to destroy everything that is good and pure, and that you are a good person if you are thwarting this attempt at Jewish world domination. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I tried to mark out for you just year by year from 1933 all the way through 37 and beyond, this escalation. And we're not going to have the time to go through year by year, but beginning in 1933, Hitler introduces legislation that is, again, designed to segregate, to isolate Jews from the Aryan population. Part of what Hitler is also doing is really clawing back all of the legal emancipations that Jewish people had earned for themselves since the age of the Enlightenment, the idea of legal equality. And so all of these are laws that are seeking to deprive the Jewish population of their rights and privileges. And so what we get is a kind of ebb and flow. In 1933, you get law after law after law that is seeking to harm Jews, specifically harming them economically, and then by extension, harming Jews socially. And what Hitler is doing is he says, in his mind, Jews are materialistic people. They only care about material goods. So we're going to hit them where it hurts. We're going to hit them in economics. And we're going to deprive them of their mostly middle class standard of living, right? We're going to make it so it's difficult for them to keep the positions that they've achieved in German society. Now, by extension, harming a person economically, for a doctor not being able to treat as many patients and not deriving that income, means that now you might not be able to live in your nice middle class apartment and in a nice neighborhood. Now you have less money, you have to move, where now you might become an anonymous person in a working class neighborhood. All of this is designed to other Jews, to put them out of their community where people do not know who they are, they don't care about them. All of this is designed to drive home that you should be indifferent to the fate of them. They're not us. You should not care about them, and you don't work alongside them. Your children don't go to school with them any longer. They certainly don't play outside with them anymore. And so there's no kind of bumping in casually to a Jewish person that isn't fraught with all kinds of tensions and difficulty. And I apologize that we can't go through year by year. But I think you can at least see that it's kind of an ebb and flow. 33 is a big year of persecution. 1934, the national government of Hitler produces no new anti-Semitic legislation. And that kind of lull gives particularly Jewish people a false sense of security. They believe, oh, we have lived through the worst of it now, and we're still standing. We're all still together as a family. And of course, this is going to be part of the problem. And I was just about to say next slide. So Haley, it was good job. In these slides, I wanted to show you again, people engaged with this propaganda. And so here we have an example during the nationwide boycott on the 1st of April. These are men who are fanatical Nazis, and they're outside of a store singing, trying to intimidate would-be Aryan shoppers from conducting their business inside of a Jewish store. And so this is a way of intimidating people. We can see the next slide. The next slide, Haley. Okay, thank you. This is after the traumatic events of Kristallnacht in November of 1938. And here I want to draw your attention. You can see the destruction, the smashed Jewish store windows, but I really want you to look at the couple walking by, that you can see their faces. Excuse me. And in their faces, you can see they're smiling, right? They're having a great day. And again, we can these are people who are making choices. And that leads us into the next slide. And this is about Aryan complicity. And with each anti-Semitic law, with each anti-Semitic attack, with each public way of humiliating and persecuting Jews, the Aryan population has a choice to make. Are they going to side with the Nazi idea of a community, or are they going to defend what is happening to their Jewish friends and former neighbors? And I think, unfortunately, we all know the answer. Excuse me. We unfortunately know the answer to that question, right? We would not have the Holocaust had more people decided, I will not be complicit with this. I will not look away. I won't smile and laugh when I see the destruction that is being wrought upon the Jewish community. But most people do not feel that they have the ability and the strength to go against their very own people. And we can go to the next slide. Here we can see some of the very popular images. This is what's called the League of German Girls. It's the female equivalent of the Hitler Youth. And they're waiting for a Nazi motorcade to go by, and they're waving their flags, and they're excited, right? And so they have imbibed that message of, we are the Volksgemeinschaft, we are the Aryans with our superior qualities, and we're part of this dynamic, youthful movement that is remaking Germany. Next slide. And this is another component, right? That here we have a young woman and a young man, and you can see that around the man's body, they've put a sign, and he is being mocked. It says, I am a race defiler. And I really kind of want you to focus not only on the look of the poor woman looking down and so forth, but look at all, particularly the children that are behind the authorities in their uniforms. By 1938, really by 1935, it becomes a crime in Germany to engage in some kind of sexual contact between an Aryan and a Jew. And so you can be thrown in prison, and in particularly the case of Jewish men, you can be executed if you've been accused of so-called defiling an Aryan girl or woman. And these types of scenarios where it's very public, a young couple is pulled out by a mob, one of them has been designated as an Aryan, one of them has fallen into the category of the other, the Jew. And this creates quite a to-do, right? You've got young children, you've got older people, they all want to see this scandalous behavior. And in many cases, the people that they've pulled out don't even have an actual sexual relationship. But if you think about all of those faces in the background, they're witnessing this, they're participating in this public shaming event. They are, again, accepting that they are part of the Aryan community and they need to enforce the rules about purity, right? Blood purity in particular. Okay, so I think we're coming up on the last slide, and then we can take some questions. What we find in the creation of the us versus them is this promise that Hitler has made to the Aryan people that they can live in an ideal world as long as they are willing to participate in this project of destruction. And for the German people, particularly by the time we arrive in 1944, when World War II is completely gone against the Germans, there's no doubt that Germany is going to be defeated. It's a question of when it's going to be defeated. Most Aryan people dig their heels in and say, we will fight to the bitter end. And this is because Hitler gave them the two choices. Either the Aryan people will demonstrate to the world their superior qualities and achieve total victory, or they will go down in utter, complete destruction. And for many German people, by the time we get to 1944, we end up with the fear kind of creeping in among German people saying, we are going to now be punished for what we did to the Jews. And I pulled out one person's quote there and put it on the slide because I think it's very revealing. And that person wrote, the folk, the people, the Aryans, say that as a consequence of a victory that is not ours, Jewry will pounce on the German folk body and realize all its devilish and bestial plans, which is why we have the slogan, death and destruction to the Jews, the future and life are ours. It's a horrible quote, right? It's a horrible thing that an Aryan person is writing. Again, drawing on all of those images that the Jews are affiliated with the devil, with animals, they're bestial, and that there's only two options. Either the Aryans win and the Jews die, or the Jews win and the Aryan race will be destroyed. And I would just kind of like to conclude by saying that here in this us versus them world, Hitler bound the German people to him in a destructive project to build an exclusionary community by eliminating any and all who were deemed unworthy to be members of the community, using familiar language that associated Jews with destruction, with evil, the devil, conspiracies, and pollution. Hitler capitalized on pre-existing stereotypes, anti-Semitic myths and legends to isolate and persecute the Jews. Using the familiar language that associated Jews with destruction and evil and the devil, he is convincing the Volksgemeinschaft that they should accept this bond, they should fight for it, and the end result is the destruction of 6 million Jewish lives. Okay.
Thank you so much, Beth. There was so much information packed into that presentation. That was fantastic.
Sorry.
No,
I
amazing.
can be more specific now that we have question and answer period.
Yes, and we have several questions which I want to address to you. And for those who are listening, if you have additional questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we'll see how many we can get to in the next 10 minutes or so. But I
Okay.
want to start with this one that came in a little bit earlier on from Mitchell, who asks, was the goal for Jews to leave Germany initially? And then I want to add to that by just saying, at what point does it change where people start to feel like it's okay to do more than just having them leave?
That's a very good question, Mitchell, and thank you, Alana, for sending that to me. Originally, when Hitler becomes the leader of Germany in 1933, and really all the way through 1938, almost into 1939, the official line that Hitler uses is, we simply want Jews to get out. We want them to leave. We want them to emigrate. Unfortunately, the Jewish lived experience as those 5 years progress is that, yes, even though the Nazi propaganda says we want Jews to leave, get away physically, again, segregate yourself from an Aryan population, the Nazi regime makes it increasingly difficult for Jews to actually successfully emigrate. And so what I mean by that is that the government begins to institute something called the flight tax, right? You're fleeing the country. And so you have to pay about 20 to 25% of all of the value of all of your assets to the government. You're not allowed to exchange foreign currency anywhere outside of Germany. You have to go to a Nazi-controlled currency office, which means they're going to charge you exorbitant rates to whatever country you've successfully emigrated to. And of course, part of the other problem is that plenty of Jewish people wanted to emigrate, to get away from this kind of narrowing down of their world in Germany. But where are you going to go? Because most of the rest of the world has their own anti-Semitic issues as well, including the United States of America. And we have a quota of how many Jewish people are allowed to come to the United States. And many other countries have that same system. And so for many Jews, you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. The propaganda says, we want you to leave, but the government is also making it as difficult as they possibly can for people to actually get out of the country to somewhere else. Even for the people who do successfully leave Germany, they pay the tax, they get all the visas, they get all the material they need to emigrate. Many of them think Hitler's a short-lived flash in the pan. He won't be in power for long. He'll be overthrown, and then we'll move back. So they go to Holland, they go to France. But as we know, once the war starts, that means that those are people who will once again be overrun by the Nazi war machine, and they will still be recaptured in the German net. So it depends on how far a person was able to emigrate. And it's always better to put an ocean between yourself and the Nazis, if at all possible. So it's definitely there. It's part of the Nazi propaganda line. We need people to emigrate. But the reality of it is that for many people, do you know another language, right? Where are you going to go? And if you're of a middle-class German Jewish family, and most German Jews were of middle-class standing, you're not going to be able to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher unless you know that new country's language fluently in order to pass their exams. So it's a kind of sleight of hand that the Nazis are doing.
hmm Thanks, Beth.
Sure.
So there's another question here. I'm going to read it to you. This person would like to know how the Nazi ideology about the Jews as a disease or as parasites relates to the larger Nazi obsession with all types of cleanliness, and when did the Nazis begin to implement kind of this more clinical language that sort of justified this otherness?
Okay, that's a very good question. I can't give you a specific, moment in time pinpointing it, but I would say that unfortunately, really the Nazis again, they don't invent very much, and they're borrowing from the intellectual movement of social Darwinism, and spinning out of social Darwinism comes a very dangerous movement called eugenics. And the eugenics movement is about racial hygiene. And so this speaks to the person's question about, purity and cleanliness and so forth. And so really from the earliest days of the Nazi party in the 1920s, when Hitler is just, starting out in and around Munich, we can already see this depiction dehumanizing Jews as a virus, as something that's dangerous and insidious. How are you going to destroy it? How are you going to cleanse the German body of this Jewish infection? And so, really, in the earliest days of the Nazi regime, partly because they are building off of the eugenics movement, which was seen as, it was the science of the day, right? Social Darwinism, with all of its racist, prejudiced thinking that classifies people according to what race you are, and those must be your qualities and characteristics. Um, that's what Hitler is. He is a social Darwinist and a eugenicist. And actually, when Hitler becomes the leader of Germany in 1933, most of the German scientific community that are eugenicists celebrate, because they say, now we finally have a leader who really understands that we have to start implementing these race hygiene principles in order to save the Aryan people. So I got to fudge a little bit. I can't give you a specific, moment in time, but I would connect it up to the what is influencing Hitler when he's the young leader in the 1920s of this new Nazi party, and that is the ideology of eugenics and social Darwinism.
So, Beth, there's another question. This one comes from Mark, who asks, did most non-Jews in Germany go along with the Nazi regime's anti-Semitism and persecution of Jews, motivated by conviction or by fear of what might happen to them if they didn't fully embrace it?
Right. I think that's a very good way of thinking about this. It is very complicated. And I think whenever I teach classes about the history of anti Semitism and the Holocaust, I try to stress to students we cannot say all German Aryan people were all indecent, horrible. You're never going to really understand what happened if you just blanket all of that. And so it is much more complicated than that. For some people, there are always going to be good people who recognize evil when it is around them, but they are the extraordinary people who have decided, I don't mind being ostracized by my own people, and I'm going to speak out. I'm going to maybe try to hide a person, try to help someone get smuggled out of the country. But those kind of hardcore resistors, I think most scholars say, is roughly maybe 2% of the total German population. For the vast majority of average Aryan Germans, some of them are, of course, fanatics, right? They really believe in Hitler's project, but most of them are intimidated. And I usually talk to my students about how Nazi policies use the carrot and the stick. the carrot is, hey, if you're a healthy Aryan, you can apply for welfare programs and you can derive all of these special benefits that Jewish people are excluded from. The stick is the public knowledge that at any moment you can be denounced anonymously and you can be arrested and you can be taken into what's called protective custody, which means they can hold you for an indefinite period of time in the early concentration camp system. And so I think that's a spot on question, because it really, in 45 minutes, I can't cover all of it. But when we're talking about this, what we find is that there are people who really aren't against Jewish people and don't really approve of this. But in most cases, they are so afraid to speak the truth. And they are so intimidated because there is always this threat hanging over their head that you can be denounced by anyone at any time. And not only will you be punished, but in many cases, your entire family will be punished as well. And of course, the Nazis used that strategy of intimidation purposefully, right? They know that most average Germans, especially in 1933, are not fanatical Nazis. And so, what do you need? You need to force the vast majority of people into silence, to intimidate them so that they are way too afraid to say what they really believe out in public. So thank you for that question, for giving me that opportunity
Yeah,
to add that in.
that's a hard one. And I have one last question for you, which
Sure.
I think will help to maybe round this out. And this one comes from Miriam, who says, "Greetings from California.
All
Thank you
right.
for your presentation. How would you help people understand that they are, in fact, scapegoating and othering? And how do you see this phenomenon today?"
Okay, that's a big question.
That's a
So I
big
don't know if I
question
can.
in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would say that the first thing, and this comes out of the book that Alana mentioned that I had written about language and rhetoric. I really do firmly believe, and when I'm teaching students, I want them to think about, how do we use our language? Are we using language that talks about where people share and have commonalities? Where is our common humanity versus our differences, right? What drives us apart? So that once you get into us versus them, it is a slippery slope of, angry people and so on and so forth. And so I would at least encourage people to stop and think before you say something. And again, there's nothing wrong with, debating people, but I think that you must use language that brings people together and stresses that most of us want the same thing, right? At bottom, most of us want to be good, decent people. We want to have loved ones around us. We want to be healthy. We want to have enough to eat. And so why not stress that instead of dividing people? And once you categorize people and you won't let them come out of that box they've been put into, uh, we are into a danger zone. And I think when James Waller speaks on September 25th, some of his research will talk about this, right? So that's
Yeah.
a good segue for people that are watching today to tune in on the 25th and listen to this man who's an expert on trying to stop genocides before they occur, and the ways in which language can be used so destructively.
That's just excellent, Beth. Thank you so, so much for all of this information and for sharing your knowledge and scholarship with us. We're so appreciative, and you've packed it full. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And my thanks to everyone who was able to tune in.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody also for attending this program today. This Lunch and Learn program is our Holocaust Center's 129th Lunch and Learn program.
Oh, great.
And we are, I know, amazing. We are fueled by all of you who are watching, your participation, your questions and comments, and your desire to learn. And coming up next month on October 24th is our Holocaust Center's annual Voices for Humanity fundraiser luncheon. So if you are in the Seattle area, please come and join us at this really great program. Your presence makes a difference. And you might be thinking, I've never attended or I don't know anyone. Don't worry, we are especially welcoming first-time attendees, and I promise you will find the hour you spend with us a really good use of your time. You can find a link on the Holocaust Center's website. It's holocaustcenterseattle.org. I want to give a huge thank you to our entire team at the Holocaust Center for all of their work and dedication. Thank you also to the Alabama Holocaust Education Center for helping to run this program, and to the many other Holocaust centers and museums who have joined together to offer this series, What History Teaches. And a reminder to join us next week for a very thought-provoking program with Dr. James Waller on Thursday, September 25th, as Beth mentioned, and you can find that on the website holocaustcenterseattle.org. We hope to see many of you next week. Thank you so much to Beth, and thank you to everybody. This concludes our program for today.